Yeah, I'm good.
Great to see everybody tonight. Make your way in your Bible to John 1. We'll do a little work there and a couple of other passages tonight. John 1. Just so you know what we're doing tonight, Jeff and I are going to go till about 20 till for our portion of this evening, and the elders are going to have a congregational meeting after that, so we'll cut the stream off at 20 till for the benefit of those who are watching online tonight, and then some announcements will be made after that meeting, and we'll close out. Great to see everybody tonight. Jeff and I are going to talk a little bit about talking to people about Jesus, and so to give you a little background about that, we talked a little about evangelism on Sunday morning a week ago, and wow, there was a lot of follow-up conversation to that. And particularly, actually, I had somebody email me and say, okay, so tell me how to talk to my friends. I have all these people around me. We talk about a lot of stuff, but we don't talk about that. So I wonder how common that struggle is. Give us a little audience response. You kind of nod your head up and down. Is that something you have found to be a struggle? I got people out there, they're in my circle, I would like to talk to them, but it just doesn't seem to come up. We don't seem to have it as part of our conversation, yeah. So first of all, let me just say that, and I know Jeff's going to agree with this, for those who preach, there just isn't anything as a more extraordinary response to a lesson than for there to be follow-up effort to put it into action.
Right.
I mean, that's just the best possible response.
Tell
right?
me more. How do I run with this?
Yes, exactly. And so as we were thinking about what we would do in this abbreviated segment before the congregational meeting, we thought, well, this is perfectly timed while the iron is hot to come back and to talk about that a little bit. So let me just pitch this question first, because it does seem a little odd that we find it difficult to talk to people.
About certain things.
But we talk to people all the time, and it isn't even that we avoid controversial things. We talk to people knowing that we're going to wade into sensitive territory.
Right.
So y'all need to know, Don Truex is going to be for a meeting at the end of March. Sadly, he is a Los Angeles Dodgers fan. I know that about it, and I want y'all to know, I have waded into a conversation with Don about the Astros cheating scandal, and I've said him straight about that. I mean, how many of you baseball fans have had some uncomfortable conversations with your friends who have totally misunderstood that cheating scandal, right? Not afraid to talk about that, right?
I'm not allowed to talk about that with you either, though.
Jeff is not right about everything, and that would be one thing. We talk about our politics.
Yeah.
At least some people, knowing that is more dangerous,
inflammatory
in this time than any time before.
Yeah.
So why is it so hard to talk about the Lord when we seem to touch the third rail about other things?
Yeah, that's the thing. I think that, first of all, just like politics, except for some reason we're more passionate about politics, we don't like risking people's anger. They have beliefs they already hold to, cherish, whatever. We live in a very tolerant age when it comes to religion in particular. It's interesting. We live in an age in which we're supposed to be tolerant, but in politics, it's like winner-take-all blood sport anymore. But in religion, because Jesus is all love, you don't challenge anybody or discuss anybody or in any way want to risk. We're culture did not want to risk telling people or implying that people are wrong religiously. And so to even ask somebody about their religion implies they might need to change it.
Yeah, and it is one of those, you don't talk about religion, you don't talk about politics. At least one of those still hold true. It's one that people consider off limits.
Absolutely.
One of the reasons I think that's true is I think people view what they believe religiously as kind of a personal matter.
It's just a private opinion.
And I don't think we feel that way about it. I think we're all happy to have conversations about it because we very much want to talk about it. But for other people, I think, for example, when is the last time you've heard somebody speak positively about a Jehovah's Witness knocking on their door at 10 o'clock on Saturday morning to talk about the Bible? Have you ever heard anybody who said, "Oh, I just had the two nicest people come to the door and I welcomed them in and we chatted"? I think most people find that off-putting,
Right.
because they see it as kind of this is a personal thing.
Yeah.
And you're kind of, I don't know you well enough
Right.
to talk about something personal like my religious beliefs.
Absolutely. And again, it's just, it's personal preference. I mean, again, in our culture, there's no absolute truth. And so because religion at its, makes absolute truth claims, we just leave everybody to figure it out on their own.
Well, okay, and so that starts to segue us into what I think is the real issue, and that is, I think we are reluctant to talk about the Lord because we fear the unknown, and that is, I don't know how they're going to respond if I bring that up.
Well, and let's even go one step further, not just the unknown, but what I'm really afraid of is that it'll go badly. They'll get angry, they'll get upset.
It's likely to go badly.
Yeah, well, yeah, I even expect it to go badly because, again, in a tolerant age, to in any way risk or imply that somebody is mistaken or needs to change. Because that's the whole point, right? I mean, going back to the Astros, I mean, we use humor to kind of, stay, to give it a non-threatening example, but when you talk about the Astros and the cheating, or lack thereof, I'm sorry.
You'll want to be really careful.
But exactly, see, that's the point, though.
We're about to get sidetracked.
What we're implying is there's a right and a wrong answer about that. And the problem is when you start leaving from something trivial like sports and going into something like religion, where, part of the takeaway of religion is somebody may need to change their life. And so we expect it to go negatively because, again, in this day and this age, the last thing that you can tell somebody or even risk somebody thinking is that they can't live the way they've been living. It's not their choice.
And two, I have found that I feel that way about politics now.
Yeah.
Because I can remember 20 years ago talking all the time with people
Yeah.
about politics, feeling pretty comfortable about that. I'm afraid to talk about that now.
Oh,
Because I just don't know where people are, and people have such intense feelings that, Heidi and I go visit a place, I'm like, don't bring it up.
Yeah.
We'll talk about any, no matter what side, don't talk about any of it, because we fear what kind of response we might get from people. And I think folks are genuinely concerned about bringing up the Lord because I don't know what's going to come from the other side. I do wonder too, though, if there's something isn't deeper going on with that. I wonder if we really believe people are lost.
Well, yeah, and I think that's something that I've and we've said this in private conversation. David, I'm convinced more and more that we don't really believe God will send people to hell. I mean, it's just the long and the short of it. Not only do we tolerate sin in ourselves, not only do we tolerate sin in our friends, but part of why we don't want to take the risk of a negative experience, somebody gets mad, somebody gets upset, we lose a friendship perhaps, is because we really don't believe that eternity's on the line in these conversations.
And yet, there does seem to come a point in time when people are willing to take the risk. Maybe I've had this conversation with people. They have a loved one that for years and years they've known they needed to know the Lord, but never really had the conversation until somebody gets sick.
Right.
Like, I find out I'm terminally ill,
right,
and suddenly I want to talk to them. Or I find out they're terminally ill, and suddenly I find the courage to do that. I think suddenly reality hits us that we're running out of time.
Right.
And it's critical.
And the thing is, though, we don't always get those chances, right? Because there are car wrecks, and as we talked about this morning, Jesus is coming back at any moment, too. And so we just assume that, when somebody finds out they're dying of cancer, then we'll have the talk.
Okay. But isn't that a question about what we really believe?
That's exactly what.
I think we need to tap that stuff that's underneath it, those basic worldview pieces of, I believe there's a God, I believe he's coming back,
Yeah.
I believe we're all accountable to his book, and
Yeah, and this isn't a matter of personal preference and private choice. I mean, people will make their own choices, but in terms of what's right and what's wrong, what's true and what's false, are there lots of ways to find God, or is there just one way to find God? These aren't, personal decisions.
And so I think we have to wrestle with that within ourselves. If I'm struggling to talk to people do I really believe they're in jeopardy? And I mean, the greatest jeopardy you can be in. Do I really believe that? And do I really care about them? I really think those are the only two issues. Do I believe people are lost?
Yeah.
And do I care about that?
Right.
Because I think if you do, if we let those things that are underneath there get out and drive us, I think it's a whole lot easier to have that conversation.
Right.
Now, it's interesting. Somebody asked, they just texted in a question, are we equipped? Do we feel like we are equipped? And I think that's another piece of it, too.
Sure. And I think we're going to get to that a little bit in some stuff we want to say later.
Yeah, but I think it isn't just wanting to bring it up. I think one of the things we fear is that if I bring it up, it won't go well, and we want it to go well.
Right.
That's another part of that.
Well, yeah, the classic, what happens if they ask me a question I don't know the answer to?
Or if we wind up talking about something that upsets them.
Right.
And so I think part of what we have to accept is that may be exactly what happens.
Yeah. No, that's exactly right. I mean, in the Gospels, as much as we focus on people gladly hearing Jesus, there are plenty of examples in the Gospels where people did not receive Jesus or hear Jesus gladly. And in fact, let's remember as well, when he sends his own disciples out to spread the news of his coming and his message, he told them, basically, if you're not received, shake the dust of your feet and go on. In other words, he told his disciples 2,000 years ago, not every town you go into is going to be glad to see you and glad to hear this. And yet their job was, if they were to be faithful to their Lord, their job was to tell people anyways. And so part of what I think we need to get used to is accepting rejection. I think for too long that we have thought that we can be good Christians and be faithful to the Lord and not have conflict with the world. And boy, is the culture starting to remind us more and more that these things are going to be more and more mutually exclusive, is that we can do what's right and bear faithful witness to the truth of Jesus and the gospel in this culture, or we can just accept the fact that there's going to be conflict.
I do think, though, it's valid to be concerned about giving ourselves the best possibility
Of course.
for this going well. So let me take you away from John for a minute. We'll come back to that in a minute. I thought about Colossians 4. And for all of us in this work, I think Colossians 4 is just such an important text to keep in front of us all the time. Colossians 4, look down at verse 5. Where Paul says, conduct yourself with wisdom toward outsiders. Let's just pause there. The Holy Spirit is concerned about us behaving wisely. And I think this passage necessarily implies that we can handle opportunities like this foolishly. And so this needs to be a concern to us. So you walk through this, make the most of your opportunity. Let your speech be with grace, as though seasoned with salt, so you will know how you should respond to each person. So he sort of defines for us what the wisdom is.
Right.
Say the right thing.
Right.
That fits the need of the moment and will be what the other person needs to hear, so that, going back to verse 5, we make the most of the opportunities that we're given.
Make the most of the opportunities, but again, no guarantees.
Well, no, there aren't any guarantees, right? Sometimes it will go badly, and sometimes it won't. But that's part of this whole process, is it not? Those sort of winnowing out between those who who have a heart to receive it and those who don't.
Well, that's right. I mean, we're just living out the parable of the sower, which is you just sow the seed, and it's not within our control or our say necessarily, even if we do the best and wisest we can. Because here's the reality. People sit there and say, I may not feel equipped or I may not be equipped. But David, you and I do this, and you and I both know you and I don't convert plenty of people that we study. I mean, that's not, that's just how it goes, ladies and gentlemen, because it's not a matter of solely in the messenger whether or not people obey the gospel.
Well, in fact, really, the power is in the message.
That's right. Because we're converting them to Jesus. Either they like what Jesus offers and they want to bow the knee to it, or they don't.
Yeah. So that kind of talks a little bit about why we struggle. We don't want to spend all our time there tonight because we do want to give some practical answers to the question that was raised, and that is, how do we talk to people? So we want to recommend a couple of very specific ways to engage the people in your circle as you're going through your day, trying to find those opportunities to talk to them about the Lord. The first recommendation we want to make is to get in the business of offering simple invitations. Now go back to John 1, because I love Philip's invitation in John 1,
Right.
right? When he's talking to Nathaniel. You
Yep.
guys remember this story?
Yep.
So Philip goes to Nathaniel, and he says in verse 45, "We have found him of whom Moses and the law and also the prophets wrote, Jesus the Nazarene, the son of Joseph." So you can tell Philip is kind of charged up about this. He's excited. He thinks he has found the Messiah. And notice what he's doing. He's telling his buddy Nathaniel about this. Let me share this good news with you. And you'll notice he doesn't get a positive response. Nathaniel said, "Can anything good come out of Nazareth?" It's like, oh, you got to be kidding me. You think the Messiah came from Nazareth?
Right.
That can't be right. And so notice Philip's response in verse 46. Philip said to him, "Come and see." So if you're given to mark in your Bible, would you underline that? Because I think that is a perfect example of what we as disciples need to do all the time in a hostile culture, is we need to extend that invitation. Philip's invitation. Philip says, "Come and see."
Yeah.
And no argument.
No.
They don't debate it.
No.
He doesn't plead his case.
No.
He just says, "Come and investigate for
Yeah.
yourself."
And it takes the pressure off you because you don't have to have all the answers, and lets the other person make up their own mind rather than us kind of, either not getting a chance to make up their own mind because we're not talking to them, we're offering invitations. So no, it's a very low stress way to invite somebody into considering the gospel of Jesus Christ.
So how many of you do that every single day? And I'm not talking about the Lord. How many of you every single day invite someone to consider something? Will you ponder that for a second? So if you went out to lunch today to a new restaurant and it was really good, how many of you are going to tell someone about that? Now, maybe it's wiser not to, so nobody else will go there and you won't have to wait. But that is not typically what we do. We make recommendations, and we do it all the time. Do it about restaurants. How many of you done that about a medical treatment? You find out someone is suffering from the same thing that you are. So I am a migraine sufferer, and periodically I encounter people who suffer from migraines. And I have to tell you that as soon as they say that, I immediately tell them what they can do about it. Because I have a doctor who put me on a cocktail of medication, and dude, it has knocked out my migraines. So if you have them, get with me afterwards, and I will tell you about the benefits of magnesium. I am happy to share that with you. I don't even have to be invited to share that with you. I am eager to tell you that. Are you guys that way too? About how many things all the time. I bet if you stopped and paid attention to yourself, you would find that you do that constantly. And it isn't a big deal. It's not like you have to debate the virtue of the restaurant you've recommended,
Yeah.
right? You just put it out there, and they're like, "Oh, I don't eat Chinese food." And so what happens to the conversation? It ends, everybody goes away, nobody died, no harm, no foul, right? So it's those kinds of simple invitations
Right.
that I think we can do for the Lord all the time.
Absolutely.
So that raises a good question. What can you recommend? I think the list is endless. How about saying to somebody, I sat in the best class on Wednesday night. We are doing this study right now, and man, fill in the blank, whatever the study is, it is helping me so much. I never knew you could learn so much from that little bitty book of Philemon. Who knew there was so much there? You could do a whole quarter of classes on it. Recommend a Bible class to someone. I don't think people realize how weird. I don't think we realize how weird Bible classes are for people, even other religious people.
Oh, yeah, and what's funny is there's actually an appetite out there. People are, there are people out there who are curious about what's in the Bible. And so sometimes rather than being preached at, that people don't want to feel like they're preached at, they don't, the Sunday sermon may not be what they're looking for, but you actually offer an opportunity to read and study and think about the Bible. There are people who genuinely, there's a reason Jordan Peter's lectures on some Bible materials are so popular on YouTube. People are curious about what's in the Bible. And so, you don't have to have this, again, this straight confrontation. We're going straight to, hey, you want to obey the gospel or not? Sometimes it's as simple as come explore the Word of God with me. And again, a very low-key and non-threatening way. Let's just read a study, let's read the Bible together and see what's going on in there.
So how many of you guys have recommended a YouTube video to someone in the last week? I did yesterday. I was visiting my granddaughter and talking to those people that keep an eye on her. And I was telling my son that I'd seen the funniest Tim Hawkins video the week before. Yeah, I know. We talked about this
I know
week.
which one you're talking about.
It's the one about hand raising in church. If you haven't seen Tim Hawkins' video about hand raising in church, don't look at it now, okay? But go home and watch it. It's hilarious. So I'm recommending my son. I said, you ought to pull this up and look at it. And guess what he did? Yeah, right then. He just pulled it up and looked at it right then. And I'm sitting there thinking,
It's that simple.
it is that simple. Man, I heard the greatest sermon yesterday. Good sermon this morning, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
My wife said it's the best one she's heard since she's been here.
That's actually awkward for both of us.
Yeah, but it was fun, wasn't it? Yeah. She's begging for clarification.
I'm glad to know I'm your favorite, Heidi.
How easy would it be
Yeah.
to say, oh, I heard the best sermon yesterday. And you ought to let me send you the link. It was really great. How simple would that be? Or someone you know with kids. Our kids are just having the best Bible class right now.
And let's say something right there about that. People will do for their kids what they're not interested in for themselves. Reaching people through their kids is actually a great way to issue an invitation.
I think it actually taps guilt.
Yeah, no, I think that's right.
Because I think there are a lot of people out there, and I think about this, how our world is changing. There are a lot of people out there raising kids today who grew up going to church, right? Mm-hmm. But they aren't going to church. So think about that. They grew up going to church, but they're not going to church, and in their ear, they could still hear their mama's voice saying, you ought to be taking my grandbabies to church on Sunday, right? Because mamas say things like that. And so when you talk about, my kids are in this class, it is so cool. They're really learning the Bible. I think it taps into a little bit of that guilt in that sense that, yeah, I need to be doing that.
Well, or even just it's simply this. I think a lot of people are realizing there's something very, very wrong in the culture right now.
Very true.
Especially with young people. And so again, the opportunity because people are worried about their kids and worried about their mental health, worried about their values, worried about their character, worried about what's influencing them on the internet. And so offering them a lifeline simply for the sake of their kids is again something that there are people out there looking for this right now.
Yeah, yeah. So let's just say a word and think about how long this list could be. Okay? You get in a sense that there are a lot of things that could be recommended to other people. Here's the thing. This does not have to be a big deal. It's like recommending a restaurant. If you recommend a Chinese restaurant with me, I'll kind of nod and smile, and I won't ever go there. So I don't eat Chinese food, not ever. And maybe you'll recommend a sermon to someone who is not interested in sermons. I think the key to all of this is to use please tell Randy I used his word, okay? Be winsome about it. Do y'all remember that sermon? I'm just going to pitch this out here, and it's going to go as far as the other person does. If they look sort of mildly freaked out, like, why are you throwing God at me all of a sudden? Let the moment pass and move right on. No big deal. Let them determine what happens next. I actually think it's one of the ways we figure out if anybody is interested or not.
Right.
You throw something out about God, the Bible, a sermon, a Bible class, and either they might bite at that a little bit, or maybe they'll say, yeah, I'm going to go get coffee. I don't want to go there with you. But hey, we learned something, didn't we?
Right.
And maybe that will help us figure out who we're going to talk to next about this. I do think that it requires on our end a couple of things. One, that we're mission thinking every day. We need brothers and sisters to be mission thinking people every day. I'm going out of my house, I'm functioning in a circle of people, most of them need Jesus. And so what recommendation can I make today? What can I invite people to consider, to listen to come and participate in? And I think we need to have that running in the back of our minds all day, every day. Where might I have an opportunity to put that out there? Okay? So, how can I begin a conversation with my friend? First thing, what can you recommend? Okay? Second thing that Jeff and I wanted to mention to you tonight is the value of asking questions. And when you're going out and you're working your circle, looking for opportunities to talk about Jesus, we'd really like you to consider the value of asking people questions. If you're in the tactics class and you're thinking, that sounds familiar, that's exactly what we're talking about, okay? So if you're in that class, we're coming back to that subject tonight. By the way, who is the great example of asking questions?
Correct answer is Jesus.
And 90% of the time in church, the correct answer is Jesus.
Well,
Right?
that's right. That's true. But no, I mean, seriously, how often does Jesus, even when he teaches parables, what do you think? But, you don't have to do all the work. You just ask people leading questions.
Who do people say that the Son of Man is? Mm-hmm. Who do you say that I am? One of the great things about a question is that it offers a great opportunity to seize a moment, sometimes when we don't know what to do with it.
Right.
Doors open up and we're really not sure where to go. So think about this as an example. Do you guys ever talk with coworkers maybe about stuff that's in the news? Anything that's going on this week. You have these conversations about stuff in the news. So a few months ago, the Supreme Court decision.
Overturned Roe v. Wade?
Yeah, going back, what, about 8 months ago?
Yeah, June.
And there was a lot of conversation at that time going on about government infringing on women's rights. So maybe you heard some conversations like that at work. Maybe coworkers, maybe you had some coworkers who were really angry about what they believed was government interfering with what is a woman's right over her body. So you hear a conversation like that, and maybe it was more than that. Maybe you thought, what can I do with that?
Yeah.
How can I use that moment?
Right.
That is a great spot to drop in a question.
Right.
Right?
Yep.
So even a simple question, well, that's an interesting position. Could you tell me more about that?
Yeah. The two great words when you're asking people questions are how and why. How do you know that's true? Why do you believe that? Why do you go there? And you get people talking about themselves. You don't have to actually confront them yet. You're just getting people talking, you're listening. Because the number one thing I think people are looking for is that they feel heard, that they've been understood first and foremost. And so that's, again, part of the power of questions. So you just start asking people, again, how? How did you come to believe that? How long have you believed that? Why do you believe that? How do you know that's true? And so forth, and make them talk.
Yeah, and I think that I think a couple of things happen when you do that. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you can just ask people to tell me more.
Yeah.
I do that in Bible class all the time.
Right.
Because sometimes people say things and I'm not sure what they mean.
Right.
And I need more data from them. And so I'll just say, well, okay, tell me more about that. Run a little further with that. Or, like you said, so what led you to believe that? Tell me what brought you to that conclusion.
Right.
Asking people for their evidence.
Yeah.
And exploring their views a little better.
And it's funny, I mean, like literally just yesterday, I was reading a pro-abortion, using this as our example still, a pro-abortion article written by a woman activist who was outraged over the Roe v. Wade overturning in the Dobbs decision last summer. And I found myself literally arguing, and arguing is a little bit of a strong word, but as I was reading the piece, and I was wishing she was there because I wanted to keep on saying, but how do you know that? There were so many like ungrounded assertions, but how do you know that's true? How do you know the woman has a right over the child in her body? How do you know how do you know that? How do you know that? There were so many undefended assumptions. And so again, you don't have to tell her she's wrong. I just want to know how she knows that's right.
Yeah.
And that's, again, a powerful way of leading somebody to even start to rethink their own positions when you keep on asking, how do you know that long enough, that they begin to realize they can't necessarily defend. And now maybe they're open to, well, this is why I believe what I believe.
Yeah. I think that when we begin by asking questions, mm-hmm. one of the benefits of that is we get more data to
right.
work with.
Right.
And I think we don't recognize how often we are putting together a story about the other person and what they believe with very, very little information.
Yes.
Which creates this misfire when you're having a conversation. Sometimes when I first impulse is start shooting back with this just a little bit of data, yeah. I may be assaulting a position that they don't even hold. I mean, I just have very little data. Or worse yet, I don't really know why they hold that position. For example,
Right.
think about the difference between somebody who holds a view of abortion because of their political leanings
Right.
versus someone who holds a position of abortion because they had one 5 years ago.
Right.
Those are two different kinds of people
Oh, absolutely.
and two different kinds of conversation. But I don't have any of that
Right.
when I start
Right.
assaulting that position.
In other words, there's somebody for whom it's just merely an intellectual or political exercise, and somebody who literally, for them to change their view, means struggling with the guilt.
I killed my child.
Yeah, if the Bible is true about that, then I killed my, and how do you now there's an emotional level to this.
So if you were talking to someone who had an abortion, wouldn't you want to nuance the way that you approach that with them a little differently than someone who was just holding it as a political view? That conversation goes a little different, doesn't it? I think it should, if we're acting with wisdom like Paul
Right.
encouraged. So I think asking questions, learning to do that first, supplies us with helpful data,
Right.
potentially. And I don't know what's going to happen next in the conversation. Maybe it won't go far at all. Maybe it open up a door to a whole bunch of new information that's going to help me know how to have another conversation or extend this conversation.
Right.
But beginning with the question at least gets us started down that road. But I think that's counterintuitive for most of us.
Oh, sure. No, because we want to convert them. We want to solve the problem. We want to correct their error. We want to enlighten them out of whatever it is. And so we don't, part of it's just patience, David. I mean, this is a more patient, time-consuming approach.
It is. And I think that a lot of us have been wired to believe that defending the faith means when I hear something that I think is wrong, I need to assault that position.
Immediately.
My responsibility is to make sure I tell them what is true and back it up and make clear that their position is wrong.
Right.
Right?
Yep.
And so I think our first impulse is I've got to say something. I've got to put what's true on the table. And yet, as soon as we do that, what's the first thing people do? They throw up their defenses.
Shut down.
They throw up their defenses, and or they become hostile because they want to protect their position.
Right. That's exactly right. Because again, emotional investment in their view, and I mean, think about any of us, man. And again, when you tell somebody they're wrong, flat out, unfiltered, that's not the way to start a conversation. It may come to that eventually, but that's not the way to start a conversation.
So let me offer a suggestion to you. You guys try this out and see what you think about this. When I'm just beginning to talk to someone about the Lord, I really try to remain a mystery to them. I really try not to say very much about what I believe on anything. I like to ask them a lot of questions and collect as much data about them and what they believe, whatever the issue is we're talking about. Do that first and delay as long as I can.
Right.
We ultimately have to put the truth on the table.
Sure.
I'm not denying
Sure.
that. But the more information that I have going into that,
Right.
the better off that I'm going to be.
No, I mean, I think the classic example of that is Jesus with the woman at the well, right?
Well, John 4 was coming to my mind, yes.
Yeah, because Jesus knows exactly who this woman is. He knows exactly what her spiritual issues are, and she's got issues, man. I mean, she's on her fifth husband. I mean, I forget the exact detail right now off the top of my head, but she's been with multiple men. The man that she's with now is not her. She's got issues, and yet Jesus talks with her, and it's not this huge confrontation initially, and what's funny is it works because she runs into town excitedly. Come meet a man who's told me everything I did. He gets to her. But it wasn't this straight up, when she comes out, with her water jug. Oh, I've been looking to talk to you about this. Let's talk about your infidelity. Let's talk about your promiscuity.
In John 4, Jesus is the picture of Randy's winsomeness,
Right.
isn't he?
Yeah.
He's gentle with this woman who has lived a very corrupt life.
Right.
And he is unprovoked
Yeah.
by her.
And when she even asks a racially charged question in their context, ironically.
Yeah, we Gentiles are the scum of the earth to you most of the time, but you want a drink, suddenly we're good enough, right?
And then she asks him religion as well. By the way, where should we be worshiping? I mean, all the hot button issues in their culture, she's bringing up.
Yeah.
And Jesus is just navigating it.
But he begins by asking her for something.
Give me a
And
drink.
then gently builds this relationship that I think allows him to say,
Yeah.
yeah, the day is coming when it's not going to be about the mountains.
Right.
And you need to not be hung up about that. And to confront her about her immorality. All of that happens, doesn't it?
Right.
But it happens at the end of the story, not the beginning of the story.
Right.
So for some of us, I think that is going to be fundamental rewiring of our approach, isn't it? Because we've grown so accustomed, particularly in a culture that is hostile to what Christians believe. It's like we're expecting a fight, and I think that our eagerness is, I got to tell people what's so.
Well, and what's part of it too, David, I can't help but wonder sometimes if we're really honest with ourselves and examine ourselves, because again, this is outside, for a lot of us, our comfort zone in the first place. Any of this is maybe it's a little bit of defensiveness on our part too, by telling other people they're wrong and confronting them, with both guns blazing. It makes me feel a little bit more secure in who I am and what I believe. And so sometimes maybe it's a little bit of defensiveness. I'm convincing myself as well in the confrontation.
So one of the things that I think we can do as we go out and we engage our circle of people, and conversations begin to arise, instead of going to default and saying, okay, here's how I need to tell them about this. Instead of doing that, be thinking, okay, what question could I ask here? And what question will continue the conversation
Right.
without putting up their defenses? I do think there is a bit of an art to this, where winsomeness becomes really, really important, because there's even different ways to say, tell me what you mean, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I can be curious, or I can be accusing. Well, what did you mean by that, right? Yeah, tell me how that's going to work. Go home and say that to your wife on the drive home, right? That's even the nature of the question is provocative. So I do think tone and word choice are important.
People can tell when you're authentically interested in them and what they think.
Boy, that's such an important word, because I don't want this to come off like teaching sales tactics.
No, that's exactly right. It's not a following the script. And I think sometimes we want to, because again, I'm afraid somebody will ask a question, I don't know, or something. We want the script for converting people, or at least teaching people, talking to people about the gospel. And the truth of the matter is, it's part of it's a human exercise. Jesus didn't follow one script. He met people where they were at.
Yeah.
And I think people, even if, I have to say sometimes I don't know when somebody asks me a question or whatever I'm afraid is going to happen, part of just people can really tell when this, number one, matters to us, it's genuine, and number two, we are genuinely interested in them. They're not just a mark in a sales, sales pitch.
I like that, authentically interested. I don't think we're ready to talk to people about Jesus until we genuinely care about them and their soul and their journey to Christ.
And that brings us back full circle to where we started earlier tonight, which is part of this is just, look, do we really believe people are lost or not? That this is really, this isn't a sales effort, this is a rescue effort.
I wonder if that has something to do with that we don't talk enough anymore about the end and judgment and the potential for hell and people genuinely being at risk for that. We're almost out of time, and we had somebody throw this in, and I thought it was really, really good. This is one of the things that was texted in, and I wanted to add this. Someone mentioned the importance of telling other people you're praying for them.
Yeah.
And I would add that to the list. If you want to find a way to engage your neighbors, find opportunities to pray for them and to let them know that you're praying for them. If their mother just died, or if somebody was in an accident, or they're dealing with drama with their children, how easy is it to say to someone, we do it with each other all the time, I'm going to pray about that. Tell me your son's name. I want to add him to my list and pray for him. I got to tell you that even people hostile to Christianity are not going to react badly to that most of the time. I don't think I have had anybody, when I said, hey, I will pray for your son, I don't think I've had anyone ever say, all right, I'm not a religious person, I don't need you to do that, right? In fact, usually people who aren't religious thinking, hey, if there might be something there, please pray for my son, And so I think that's also an opportunity, another thing to add to the things we can do in our circle.
Absolutely.
To help people begin that conversation. We're down to 5:39, and we got to wrap this up. Really appreciate your interest in following up with this. And to whatever degree Jeff and I can help you with that, we'd love to talk more about that, and want to just keep pouring gas on that fire, encourage us to be reaching the lost around us. Let's have a quick prayer, and then we'll dismiss for the elders meeting that will follow right after this. We're so grateful, Father, that we can think about how to reach the lost of our day. And we pray you would stir us as a church family to be passionate about lost people, to care deeply for them, and do everything that we can to reach them. Bring to us the lost of this community and make us very effective as we strive to reach them. In Jesus' name, amen.